Hello and welcome to Farm Connections. I'm your host, Dan Hoffman. On today's show, we meet with Randy Doyle, the CEO of Alcorn Clean Fuel, to take a tour of their expansion project and talk about the benefits of clean fuel and what it provides for our community. Kent Tesey will inform about the difficult grain decisions facing farmers and have a conversation with Steve Peterson to discuss the importance of agricultural sustainability. All here today on Farm Connections.
Welcome to Farm Connections with your host, Dan Hoffman.
Farm Connections, sponsored by Alcorn Clean Fuel, a farmer-owned cooperative in Claremont, Minnesota, produces ethanol, high-protein livestock feed, and corn oil, and beverage-grade carbon dioxide for resale to benefit its members and their communities. Absolute Energy, a locally owned facility, produces 115 million gallons of ethanol annually, proudly supporting local economies in Iowa and Minnesota. Absolute Energy, adding value to the neighborhood. The Agricultural Utilization Research Institute, collaborating with businesses and entrepreneurs to foster long-term economic benefit for Minnesota through value-added agricultural products. You can learn more at auri.org. Kahn Tile Supply, Leroy, Minnesota, and New Hampton, Iowa, since 1985, supplying the market with field drain tile products, dual wall, metal culverts, septic systems, PVC, and plumbing supplies.
Welcome to Farm Connections. We're on site at Alcorn Clean Fuel in Claremont, Minnesota, and with me is Randy Doyle, CEO.
Hey Dan, how are you?
Well, I'm great and welcome. I'm excited to hear about what you're doing here. I drive by on 14 and I'm just like, wow, there's cranes, mini cranes, there's trucks in and out. What is going on?
Well, it's a big construction project, Dan. We're expanding and modernizing our facility. We've been here in Claremont a little over 20 years. We started as 10 million gallons per year. As you know, we've expanded a few times in the past, but this one is pretty big. We're adding another 70 million gallons of capacity, so we'll be over 120 million gallons when we get done.
Can you help us with what does 120 million gallons look like?
It looks like a lot of alcohol, Dan. The two big tanks that we're building out there, those would store 2 million gallons apiece. The one large tank that's closest to us when you drive by, that's a 1 million gallon tank. So it'd be like having 120 of those sitting out there.
Incredible.
Yes.
We often hear people say, why do we have to get bigger? Why can't we stay smaller? On the farm, it's when you went from 10 or 20 cows to 40, and then it was from 40 to 400, and then from 400 to something bigger than that. Why are you doing this?
Well, we need to be able to compete with those folks, those plants that are larger than us. We work with a lot of other plants. We benchmark with some, and we know what those economies of scale look like and what they're worth. I'd like to be able to keep producing and making a profit for the folks who invested in us in the first place. For us to be able to do that, we need to get that scale, that size that enables us to be competitive. There's also some new things that we'd like to adopt and add in that reduces our energy consumption. We're already pretty low, but we're looking at ways to do that even better. There's a lot of neat things in this project, Dan, that will enable us to be here for another 20 years.
Well, tell us about some of those. One of them obviously is energy efficiency.
Yes. The new distillation design chases energy the opposite direction we do today. And that's really what we do here is we just exchange energy back and forth. But this chases it the opposite direction, and it's a little more efficient. I'm really looking forward to running that. I've seen it operating in another facility, and we're going to be very happy when we get that up and operating. But on top of that, we're adding a CHP unit, combined heat and power. That means that we're basically running a jet engine. We're burning natural gas to this jet engine, and it's spinning just like a jet engine does, and it's connected to a generator that generates electricity. That generator will be putting out a little more than the amount of electricity we're using today in our facility. So it's going to basically replace what we're using currently. But the exhaust off that jet engine goes into a boiler, and it generates steam for the additional capacity. So we're getting two benefits out of that same BTU of natural gas, electricity and steam.
That's fantastic.
It really is. It drops the greenhouse gas score tremendously, and makes it much more efficient. We're really looking forward to getting that online.
Well, that's one efficiency. There must be some others because you're trying to build margin and add value to corn.
Well, a lot of the efficiency comes from the fact that while we're expanding the capacity significantly, we don't have to add a lot of fixed costs to do that. And that's where some of that economy comes from. So that's a really big plus for us. There's also some things that we've been playing with for a while. Our plant's pretty efficient in terms of yield. We're doing a really good job, Dan.
You talked about yield. A farmer, when he measures yield, it's in terms of bushels per acre, or bushels per farm. Yep. When you say yield as a biofuels producer, yep, what do you mean?
Well, we mean how many gallons of alcohol can we get out of that bushel of corn. When we started here, we were getting about 2.5 gallons of ethanol for every bushel of corn, and today we're right at 3.
Wow.
That doesn't sound like a lot until you multiply that times the millions of bushels that we're using in a year and realize that from the same corn, we're generating a whole lot more alcohol. But for me, what this is about, Dan, is it's about stewardship. God gave us this earth and we're supposed to take care of it. And one of the ways that we can do that is watching what we use for fuel. Our oil is precious. It's a finite resource. And on top of that, there's this negative effect that we have when we're pumping it out of the ground, burning it and releasing all that carbon that's been stored for a long time. Instead, we can use a corn plant. That's the best solar collector there is. Those big leaves are great solar collectors. It's collecting that sunlight, that solar energy, and turning it into a battery in the form of the corn kernel. That little tiny kernel is the best battery we've ever seen. It stores a lot of energy. Our job here is to take that corn kernel that's really destined for the feed market, step in the middle and strip the starch off, convert that starch, which we don't need more of in our livestock feed, but strip that starch off, turn it back into fuel, into a liquid fuel that we can use for our cars that's solar-based, right? Mm-hmm. And concentrate up that feed value and then ship it on. So it only takes 1/3 the transportation that it did before to get that to the feed market. So all we're doing is we're getting in the middle there, taking off the part that we really don't need for livestock feed, concentrating up the rest, and reducing the cost of transportation. At the same time, generating transportation fuel for us to use here that burns much cleaner, cleans up our air, and is renewable. Wow. I got a fun job, Dan.
I would say.
I really do.
And when we look around your plant, we see another loading facility for DDGs.
Yes.
What's happening there?
Well, that was one of the first fun things we saw going up here, and something that we posted early on was the 90 hours of the slip form pouring for our DDGS silos. It went around the clock, and those DDG silos will hold our distiller's grains. That's that concentrated portion of the feed. It'll hold that and enable us to load trucks like we do today, but also rail. We're building a big rail facility, Dan. And
I'm noticing that.
Yeah, as you drive by, some people thought we were building a racetrack. It kind of looked like it. It's a pretty big racetrack, but it's just a racetrack for trains.
I'm guessing you need that huge loop or that circle just to be able to facilitate and move it, but also to be efficient as far as storage of tank cars?
Yes, and our goal there is to be able, when the time comes, to take advantage of unit train shipments. We'll be doing that with ethanol almost immediately, but at some point we'll be doing that as well with distillers grains. So we'll have a loop for distillers, a loop for ethanol, and then a loop to receive and ship out of.
Possibly bringing corn in if needed?
If we bring corn in here, it was a very bad year here. It's the possibility, and we plan for it, but we don't want to see that happen.
I reflect back in time, especially when corn prices weren't so great, and farmers in this area shipped corn largely to the river. It went on a barge and it went all over the world. And the basis or the amount paid to the farmer versus what it was sold on Chicago Board of Trade was wide.
Yes.
And you and your partners in industry have done something with that. Now sometimes we have grain come up the river, get off, and come to our ethanol plants, our biofuel plants, and the basis has widened, meaning the farmers are probably receiving a higher price than they would have. Is that true? That's
true, yeah. So since we're a negative basis, we usually say that basis narrowed here, when that price goes up. That's really happened. The impact of our industry has changed the way we move corn, because we're now moving to distillers grains instead. Those barges, that used to ship corn, we put a lot of distillers grains on those.
And you know, that's a great point. That feed product that used to come from corn still is there. And
It's
you had
still there.
You had a percentage of that
Yep.
product. You said about a third goes to liquid fuel or ethanol, and then what percentage goes into DDGs or dried distillers
So
grains?
by weight, it's about a third of that bushel. But again, it's the concentrated feed portion. There's another, I would say, thing that we've learned over the years is that you can recover some crude corn oil. And that corn oil makes a great feedstock for biodiesel. So not only are we producing ethanol, we're also shipping corn oil to produce biodiesel. But it also makes a great poultry feed. And so about half of the corn oil we produce here goes for poultry feed, and the other half goes down to make biodiesel.
Well, you've certainly got a great expansion plan here, and when does it come online?
We're hoping that we're starting up March or April of next year, so it's not that far off.
What's behind this place? Is it just the employees, or are there farmers? Are there board members? What's really making this move forward?
Well, it's really all of us working together. There are two really bone deep beliefs that we have here. One is constant improvement. We believe that there's always a better way, and we're always challenging ourselves and challenging our process to try to find that better way. So out of that, Dan, we've improved our yield over the years. We've gotten more efficient. We've dropped our energy consumption. We were the first plant to go zero liquid discharge. Figured it out here. That meant we cut our water consumption by about down to a third of what it was before. All that is because we believe that there's a better way. But what really fuels that is collaboration. We work together. We think, we may have one idea, but other people out there probably have a lot better ideas. And if you work together with them, you find those better ways. And everybody gets better. It's not about trying to, keep a secret, but if you share an idea, it blooms and it grows. And yes, other people benefit, but that's great because they'll discover things that you didn't. And if you're working together and sharing those ideas, you get better. That's really the core of what makes us work here.
And thinking past our area, thinking past Minnesota, we're hearing about China possibly mandating 10% blend. Any thoughts on that?
There are a lot of countries out there that are following kind of the same lead as China. The air quality in China, if you've been there, you've seen how bad it is. They need help. And their folks are getting more affluent. They're driving more cars. They need to do something about their air. And that's one way to help clean that up. We saw it as, when we started the mandate program in the cities, our air quality improved.
Environmentally friendly.
Environmentally friendly.
Adding value to farmers in our community.
Yep.
Jobs. You do have a fun job here.
I do. It's a lot of fun. There's a lot of benefit, and it's just a way to keep learning, keep growing, and keep improving. It's really being a good steward, Dan. That's what it's about.
Well, thanks for sharing and also the work you do.
Thank you, Dan.
Stay tuned for more on Farm Connections.
Many farmers will tell you that one of the most difficult things to do in managing a farm operation is to make grain marketing decisions. In the days or weeks following the date that a grain marketing decision is made, there is at least a 50% chance that the market may go higher. For many producers, this makes the grain market sale seem like a wrong decision, even if the sale price was at a profitable level. However, there is also an equal chance that grain prices may decline in the days or weeks after the sale, which could reduce profit margins or even lead to a loss. In recent years, many Midwest farm operators have had large amounts of corn and soybeans stored on the farm in the year following harvest, waiting for favorable market conditions. Based on the USDA report in March of 2017, 56% of the total U.S. corn stocks and 40% of the soybean stocks were still in on-farm storage. Most of the grain that is stored on the farm in March of a given year likely still needs to be priced in the spring or summer of that year. Farmers usually patiently wait for the corn and soybean markets to show a spring price rally to sell their grain, which usually occurs between March and June. In some years, the grain price improvement is very limited, such as occurred with old crop corn prices in the spring and summer of 2017. The estimated high level of 2016-17 corn ending stocks, along with a large 2017 corn acreage, limited any significant grain market improvement during 2017. This forced some farm operators to sell their corn in storage below their 2016 break-even levels for corn production. Based on farm business management records in southern Minnesota, the average 2016 corn yield on cash rented land was nearly 205 bushels an acre. The average break-even price was about $3.20 per bushel to cover input expenses and land rent, and about $3.70 per bushel to cover all direct and overhead expenses. For producers that had weather issues in 2016 and averaged closer to 190 bushels an acre, the break-even corn price was about $3.80 per bushel to cover expenses and land rent, and near $4.30 per bushel to cover total costs of production. The local cash corn price was between $3 and $3.40 per bushel during the summer of 2017. Similar to growing a crop, every year is different when it comes to grain marketing decisions, which is what makes this aspect of farm management so difficult. Given seasonal trends in the corn and soybean market, producers probably need to have a calendar target as well as a price target to sell their corn and soybeans. If farm operators plan to store unpriced grain after harvest, they need to have a marketing plan to take advantage of any price rallies and to have the grain sold by the following summer. That's all for today. We'll see you next time.
We're in Mankato, Minnesota at the South Central College Ag Symposium, and with me is Steve Peterson from Paynesville, Minnesota. Steve, welcome to Farm Connections.
Thanks, Dan. Good to be here.
Well, right now you're a producer, but you've got a long background of working in the food industry. Tell us about that.
Sure. I always say I'm just short of 60 years old. My entire life I've been involved in production agriculture. My dad was one of the founders of the turkey industry in Minnesota, so that's what I worked in as a kid. And we have, to this day, a crop and beef farm near Paynesville, Minnesota, that I'm still involved with. Half my life, I worked for Pillsbury and then General Mills. We're blessed here in Minnesota, as you know, to have some of the largest food companies in the world based here. And so that's a bit of my, nothing special, but have, I guess, a unique history in that I can speak the voice of the farmer and the voice of a large food company. And I think that the world needs more of that to sort of mingle and come together than it has in the past.
Great point. Why?
Well, I think, again, there's both of those parts of the food value chain are facing great challenges today.
Absolutely.
As you know, as a producer, we produce more than what we need today, and we have low prices, and in fact, for a good portion of my land, I rented out into a 3-year lease agreement here because I'm sick of losing money in farming. We're going to continue to do some cattle and all that, so that's obviously the challenge facing production agriculture. Companies like General Mills are also facing a huge challenge. General Mills has had declining sales for 5 or 6 years. The portfolio of foods that made them successful is becoming irrelevant to today's consumer.
Why?
Largely because people are moving away from processed and packaged foods for fresh, perceived as healthy foods. And General Mills is 150 years old last year, is rapidly trying to change its portfolio. So I tell the story of Betty Crocker, if you will, is in assisted living. Betty Crocker has been replaced by Annie's. Annie's is a large portfolio of organic foods. Is being replaced by Liberté and Yoplait yogurt, healthier foods which are in the portfolio. And those would be a couple of examples of the transition that's occurring there at General Mills.
Major paradigm shifts.
Yep.
You worked with General Mills on sustainability and some other things. What was that role like?
Yeah, so my 30 years, I have a master's in agricultural economics. I started as a commodity analyst, and most of my career was in sourcing or purchasing, sourcing food all over the world. The last job I had before I retired from General Mills was heading up our whole sourcing sustainability program, which you could call agricultural sourcing. What we realized at General Mills is that when we started our sustainability journey, we started in our own plants, factories, reducing the lights and the water and all, but we realized that, I always say, we weren't fishing where the fish were. The fish, relative to sustainability, is really upstream from us in agriculture. 99% of the water footprint of total General Mills comes from agriculture. 75% of the carbon footprint comes from agriculture. Consumer sort of concerns about animal welfare, people and activists that would picket us, comes from agriculture. Concerns about child labor in picking cocoa in West Africa for Cocoa Puffs, related to agriculture. There's the example of where really our whole sustainability program really shifted in the focus upstream back to sourcing or to our suppliers and a relationship there.
And you've since left the corporate world and you're a farmer. How does that impact your farm?
I guess the farm is I'm really interested in the farm, my own farm, and looking at a consumer direct model versus a commodity model. I'm kind of sick of not having control of my destiny there, and so I'm giving a lot of thought to changing the way we operate there on my farm into the future, and I think that all farmers today. So the point is, I guess, is that this world of production agriculture and the world being closer to the consumer, I think, need to come together better. And so I think from a farmer-producer perspective, more that farmers can sort of think about what does the consumer want and provide value to a specific set of consumers is going to ensure their survivability and their destiny better than being in a traditional sort of commodity sort of farm situation.
Well, thank you, Steve. Interesting comments. Let's watch and see what happens.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Stay tuned for more on Farm Connections.
Minnesota soybean farmers were happy with a recent announcement at FarmFest of the biodiesel blend in the state going from 10 to 20%. The governor's office made the announcement of the new B20 mandate, and it was welcome news for farmers in a state that's been a leader in biodiesel in recent years. Besides being good for the environment and biodiesel production, it's good news for soybean usage and ultimately prices. Tom Slenica is Executive Director for Minnesota Soybean.
Well, you know, we just couldn't be happier with the governor's office and the Department of Ag working with farmers to understand the value of biodiesel. So it's official. Minnesota is going to go to B20. So next year, next summer, all the blends in Minnesota will be a 20% part of biodiesel, and the rest will be regular diesel fuel.
The move to B20 has taken a lot of work and research by the soybean industry, and certainly proves farmers' efforts pay off.
We're standing on the backs of giants, if you will. Better than 25 years ago, the industry started looking at this as a possibility, and the farm groups and the farm leaders come together, working with industry to say this is something we want.
Because in 2002, we started getting the legislation and we got it passed. the B2 mandate. And it took until 2005, I know the date very well, September 29th, that we implemented the biodiesel 2% mandate, and we have just constantly moved forward. We are the leader in the nation for biodiesel because we were the first one for 2%, we were the first one for 5%, first one for 10%, and nobody's even close to us at 20%. So Minnesota can be very proud of their great effort towards renewable fuels.
The change from a 10 to a 20% blend of biodiesel is good news for the soybean industry in Minnesota, good for the environment, but also good for the value of those beans for farmers. Currently, over 60 cents of each bushel is attributed to biodiesel. And with the change, that's good news for the future. This is Lynn Kettleson reporting.
With our resources becoming more expensive and conservation becoming key, it's important that we continue to explore other potential avenues to make what we already have before us provide more and last longer. I'm Dan Hoffman. Thank you for joining us on Farm Connections.